Thank you, Brother Richard, for sitting down once again for Behind the Final Call cover story. This volume is number 38, number 46. August 20th is the date on the paper. The title of the paper, Ferguson, 5 years later, a renewed call for justice for Mike Brown and a continued movement for change. Why this cover story?
Well, thank you, Brother Troy, for having me. And we're here today at the historic offices of the Final Call newspaper. This past weekend, the weekend of August 9th, marked the 5th anniversary of the killing of Mike Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. This is the 18-year-old teenager killed unarmed by a white police officer in what should have been at most a traffic stop, but somehow it escalates into this young man being shot at least 6 times. And he was believed to have been killed by a fatal shot to the head. So this is a time to reflect on what has happened in Ferguson in particular, what has happened around the country, because the death of Michael Brown Jr. sparked a movement nationally around this question of police violence, police murder, police brutality. There was, of course, the uprising in Ferguson, where our people physically resisted the oppression and the crackdown and the rubber bullets and the tear gas and the gas canisters and all of these different assaults from law enforcement. So we wanted to come back 5 years later. Big weekend for Michael Brown Sr., the father who has a foundation. Big weekend for Leslie McSpadden, Mike Jr.'s mother, a big weekend. And so both of them have foundations where they essentially run different kinds of programming. A lot of it geared toward young people, but integral to both of their foundations is working with families and advocating for families who have also lost loved ones to police violence or violence. So they're both engaged in a very important work. And as I was in Ferguson, and Ferguson, of course, is a suburb of St. Louis, I was reminded that that anniversary for the killing of Mike Brown Jr., it's not a birth anniversary. It's really a painful anniversary. So for the parents and the families to come every year to commemorate his life, to commemorate his legacy, and continue to do work in his name is really a pretty powerful thing. So there's been some changes in Ferguson, some changes in policing, but the struggle continues, as we say.
Yes, thank you. Pretty sobering. Of course, there's a few articles that are in here, at least 3. A new chance at justice for Mike Brown Jr., Ferguson 5 years later, still painful, still healing, still in the struggle, a mother, a mission, and memories. I know you began to touch on that. Can you give us kind of an update on this fight and what's going on?
Well, one of the important things that happened during the weekend on Friday, August 9th, which is the actual anniversary of the day that Mike was killed, Mike Jr. was killed. His father called for a reopening of the investigation into his son's death. This is very important because among the changes in the region is that you now have a black county prosecutor, Wesley Bell. For many years, blacks complained that the former prosecutor, Bob McCullough, white man, nearly 30 years in office as a prosecutor, was biased against black people and way too pro-police. Wesley Bell was elected, I guess, last year. And so now he has the authority to reinvestigate and look into this case again. So Michael Brown Sr. said that he doesn't feel that the county prosecutor owes him anything, even though I don't think there's any denying, you really can't deny, that part of the reason why blacks went to the polls to choose Mr. Bell, who's also a former Ferguson city councilman, who was also among those who was out protesting during the unrest.
Wow.
It is undeniable that this question of police brutality, this question of justice for Mike Brown, this question of the need for police reform, questions about lethal force and the taking of life, all of these things definitely impacted that election. And all of those things and those concerns would have tilted the election in the favor of Wesley Bell as someone new coming in who was looking to change the direction of the county prosecutor's office. So, I've got an editorial also in this edition, and my basic argument is kind of that, elections have consequences, they say. This is a county prosecutor, so he is chosen by people not just for his legal expertise. He's chosen because as an elected official, people want him to deliver or move in certain ways. So, for example, you may have, if people feel that criminals aren't being charged enough, they may elect a prosecutor who says, I'm going to be tougher on crime, right? And I'm going to charge individuals to the maximum amount. It doesn't mean that he's going to make anything up. It means that he's going to look at the law, he's going to look at the concerns of his constituents, and he's going to do that within the bounds of the law that meshes with what the people who elected him to serve want done, as they say this is what we believe justice and law enforcement look like. If you have a problem with the budget is too big, county prosecutor may come in and slash the budget to go in line with what the fiscal responsibilities of the office are according to the people who elect him. So again, we say that elections have consequences. So my point is, if elections have consequences, and if this question of police killing, this question of police accountability, this question of the need for police reform, if that was a serious issue for voters, and I believe it was, should voters expect the person that came in to respond to their needs and desires?
Yes, sir.
And so, again, I think the critical thing is that this grieving father, now imagine you lose your son in what was supposed to have been a traffic confrontation or a traffic encounter. The initial encounter was supposed to have been based on, allegedly, Mike Brown Jr. and another young man walking in a little street that winds through some apartment complexes, and the officer tells them, get out of the street. How does a quote-unquote jaywalking offense turn into a deadly encounter? How does that happen? And why does it only happen with us? And so my point is that you've got a new prosecutor, a black man, and you've got constituents calling on him to reopen the case. And it'll be interesting to see if they do. We all saw the reopening of the case of Bill Cosby. Years, not 5 years after the fact. Years, a sealed deposition, reopened because there was a feeling among some that injustice had been perpetrated and the prosecutor had a duty to reopen that case. So we say in the editorial, we take the position that it is a reasonable request and that it should be opened. We talked to attorney Anthony Gray, who works in that area and who helped the family with its civil claim. And he said the fact that Mike Jr. was unarmed, just that alone is basically enough for this thing to be looked at again. So we'll see what the new prosecutor, Wesley Bell, ultimately does.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And as we hear about these shootings, we see the weather, we hear about death on top of death and murder occurring. Of course, we know these are all signs of the fall of America. There's an article in National Story, Black Men, the Police Are Dangerous for Your Health, which is not something new or strange to us. But also, of course, we know of the recent mass shooting that occurred, the aftermath, fear, uneasiness, and aftermath of mass shootings, which actually, within a few hours, there were 2 mass shootings. Can you speak on that?
Well, this story, warning black men, the police are dangerous to your health, is a very, very important story, and we should not overlook it because for most of us, we've already seen this as a reality. But what we're looking at now is scientific data, right, that says that a leading cause of death. I mean, think about this. One of the leading causes of death for black men and young black men is an encounter with police. I mean, imagine that. First of all, you have to consider what is the size of that population in the United States, number one. And how can it be that this minority within a minority, if you want to call it like that, so if blacks are a minority, that's less than the majority population. And if black men are not 100% of the population, which we're not, that's an even smaller number of people. But yet, this is research done that said that blacks, or black men in particular, about 1 in 1,000 black men and boys are likely to be killed by police. This is like 2.5 times anybody else. The numbers are high, of course, for Latinos and Native Americans as well. So we think that this says something about something that is very wrong in the society and something structurally wrong. Because this is police forces around the country, and the researchers are saying that they're still trying to kind of get a grip on the numbers, because most of these types of shootings, the police self-report. There's no national reporting requirement. So again, these are very important types of stories, you know, and we need to really look at them and ask ourselves the question, what's going on here, and can we continue to survive under these conditions? So the mass shootings, of course, we had in Dayton, and we had in Texas. I mean, again, just the widespread death, the savagery of America, and we say the unraveling of a country, where you see such just broad killing. There's still questions in Dayton about motivations, but I think you had about 9 people killed in 30 seconds or something like that. Not to mention the lives lost in El Paso, where somebody drove 10, 11 hours to get to a place to kill some brown people. These are the times we're living in, and I think we never want to mock death. We never want to make light of death. We never want to gloat at the loss of life. But I think each one of these tragedies, unfortunately, bring us to a question of whether or not we can live as black people in this country with the dominant society in peace, because they are attacking us. Can non-white people really live in this country in peace? And I think the sad and deadly reality that we're seeing, unfortunately, is that no, we really can't. So I think that ultimately is going to lead us to have to make some decisions.
Yes, sir. I want to jump, and of course, inshallah, we'll end on a more positive note and an uplifting note.
Well, you know, sometimes the truth,
yes, sir,
even if it's harsh, I hope will uplift us, because we now are looking at reality.
Yes,
and the question is, how are we going to respond to it?
Yes, sir. And of course, we want to make sure that we're aware of what's going on, not just in our borders, but outside and internationally. And of course, there's an article dealing with Rwanda. Congo restricts unnecessary border travel amid Ebola virus.
I mean, this is, again, you got Rwanda and Congo, and you got this contagious disease, deadly disease, Ebola, and now, you know, you got these 2 African countries trying to figure out how to deal with it. So this is, again, I mean, just a sign of the times. You've had some changes as well as in terms of maps being redrawn in Indian ruled Kashmir, which was an autonomous part of the country where Muslims live. So there's a lot of upheaval on the international scene, and we need to stay awake, and we need to stay aware of what's happening.
Yes, sir. Of course, many may be aware and probably heard about our sister Toni Morrison and her recent passing. And there's 2 pieces that are on that. Of course, Sister Khalila Muhammad, right here in Chicago, who is a Toni Morrison scholar,
Mm-hmm.
actually has some words to share about our sister Toni Morrison. Can you give us a little bit about that coverage?
I mean, you know, it's we wanted to pay tribute really to this amazing woman, this amazing writer who wrote unapologetically about black people, the hopes, the fears, the realities, the dreams, and presented us in ways that the mainstream had not presented us. The other thing that, you know, when you hear people talk about her life is how many other writers that she helped.
Mm-hmm.
That once she got to a position of influence, she would help others. So this is in the great black literary tradition. Her books like The Bluest Eyes, Song of Solomon, Beloved, kind of masterful storytelling. And we should treasure them, we should read them, we should consider them, and we should be thankful that we have the opportunity to express ourselves and to speak for ourselves.
Yes, sir.
It's one of the major points when it comes to self-determination of any people, that you are able to represent who you are to the world as opposed to somebody else telling the world who you are. So I mean, a great sister, great contribution, and a great story, great article by Sister Kalila, who talks about what Toni Morrison meant for her as a black woman, who eventually became a scholar, a writer, researcher in her own right. So again, this is kind of some cultural information that we hope our people will enjoy.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Now, a little more, let's change the vibe a little bit. Of course, there's an article from the NOI Prison Reform Ministry dealing with sharing light in the belly of the beast in Michigan. Can you share about what that article is discussing?
Well, this is from, I guess, actually an event kind of late last year. But it just talks about the role of the prison ministry, the National Prison Reform Ministry, and Brother Abdullah Muhammad, and those who help him, their role in going into these institutions every day, serving our brothers and sisters who need the light, the life, and the power of the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And so many of our brothers and sisters who often actually suffer just to get the final call, just to get a bit of information. So we always want to highlight those involved in this important work. It is probably among the most important work that we do, serving those who really cannot serve themselves. So we're glad to be able to highlight this, and inshallah, next couple issues, we plan to present a little more.
Thank you, thank you. And I got another one dealing with Baltimore, and our brothers and sisters are continuing our work in the streets. Can you share what that work is?
Well, you know, the final call is a tool dedicated to the resurrection of the black man and woman of America in the world. That means moral, spiritual, economic, social resurrection that comes from touching our people and helping to make our communities safe and decent places to live. So we had a photo essay this week showing the brothers in the great city of Baltimore, my hometown, you know, as we say, putting in the work, going into the community, helping to clean up the community, interacting with people in the community, being an example for the community. You know, all these things are very important. This is the work of the Nation of Islam, and we're always proud to showcase the believers that work and engage in this mighty mission.
Yes, sir. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Of course, and I always have to lift it, and all of these things, and of course, you know, with our current president is encouraging us to let us know that separation is the best and only solution. So as we look at what's going on in the world, we have to be reminded that it's a great and a dreadful day, but justice is coming. So the minister's article, Justice is the Joy of Freedom. Can you speak a little bit on that, and then I'm going to pass it on to you.
I think that's a very important article, because the minister lays out the principles for justice, what it is, why it matters, and what it means to human existence, and the role that it plays in the lives of nations and societies. So as we look at Ferguson 5 years later, the question is, where's the justice? When we look at the killings in El Paso, the killings in Dayton, Ohio, the question will ultimately be, where's the justice? When we look at the shooting unjustly of black men and boys, I mean, imagine an encounter with the police is a leading cause of death. That's major. That leads us again to the question of, where's the justice? For the family, friends of Michael Brown, his mother, his father, his siblings, who still feel the pain of his loss, where is the justice? So the minister's article lays out what that justice is and why it's important. So we should look at that. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has an article, Is America as Merciless as Ancient, is Modern America as merciless as ancient Nineveh? So there's a lot here to consider, and we hope that the viewers will do that they'll get the paper, they'll go to finalcall.com and check it out on the website. They'll follow us on social media, and you can subscribe to the digital edition right there at finalcall.com. But we will just continue, and we thank everyone for their support, and we will just continue to try to deliver the truth, that word and that message that will awaken us and have us acquire the right information so we can make the right choice in this time.
Yes, sir. And also with that, in particular with this coverage, you can expect to see, so be on the lookout for, since you were down there, we got a few interviews that we want to share. So be on the lookout for those in the coming days. Of course, we never want to give you all that's in the paper, but you got to make sure that you get the paper so that you can read these stories more in depth. And not only when you get the digital edition, I got a quick plug. If you're kind of lazy sometimes, and I admit sometimes
if you're just
busy, that makes it sound bad. You can just have the paper read to you. So while you're doing something else with the digital edition,
you just hit a button and it'll start speaking. It'll read itself to you.
And it's been a recent update, so the voice sounds a little less mechanical.
Wow.
So you want to check that out. Brother Richard, what else in the paper do we need to cover?
Well, I think that's it. I would say again, we just hope that our readers will continue to support us. We hope to give you information that you find is important. Continue to spread the word, continue to follow, support you.
Yes, sir. Thank you once again. Behind the Final Call cover story. Until next time. Peace. Assalamu alaikum.
Peace.